There was nothing like the handshake government, because I remember very well that when the handshake happened, there is no any single point that the RAILA faction sought for any kind of jobs or positions of responsibilities in the government of Uhuru Kenyatta. In any case, everybody who was aligned with the then Deputy President William Ruto were holding their positions as were drawing their salaries as were, and were holding responsibilities that they were supposed to do for Kenyans. Now,
where do you people draw the line between open-mindedness and people making their own decisions vis-a-vis sticking to the party's directives?
If the argument is that the economy stagnated on the basis of demonstrations that end up turning violent, then it is state-sponsored violence and must never happen.
Well, a very good day to you, ladies and gentlemen, depending on whichever part of the world you are watching us from. Welcome to Kenya's most comprehensive political analysis show. Definitely, we do put things here as clear as possible. My name is Evan Sokinyi. Thank you for joining us. And today, for the first time, we are joined by one of the most vibrant Kenyan leaders here. Of course, it's a young man by the name Senator Eddie Gicheru Okech, all the way from Migori County. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Asante.
Number of people are asking, by the way, why is it that you are a leader from the larger Luo region, yet there is the name Gicheru there? And they're wondering, how did you get that name?
Well, I get this question all the time. But the shorter version is that growing up, I lost my mother in 2003, and I had to leave the village and go and try life in different places, which led me to find myself in the back streets of different towns. And it was from the back street that I was adopted by one of the Kikuyu families that brought me up, that had the name Gicheru. So that's how I ended up acquiring. It's a foster family's name.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great. Definitely you've got a very good background there. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this exclusive and interesting episode of the Candid Talk here. And of course, stay tuned for the conversation here with the Migori County Senator Eddie Okech. Now, Senator, let me ask you, for the first time, definitely, I know you're serving your first term as a senator. How does it feel having vied in the past and perhaps failed to get to this position?
I think the one word I would say is challenging. It's a job like no other, because traditionally I was in the corporate sector. I started my job, actually I was an entrepreneur. I started my job as an entrepreneur. I was running a company called Ongoza, which is basically a company that was helping young people to develop businesses. Some people call them incubators, some people call them accelerators, depending on which part of the world you come from.
Yes.
But the essential bit of the company was that we work with young people who have got small and medium businesses, coach them, and then put them in a community of investors who can be able to look at the viability of their businesses, and then place capital to them, to those businesses. So that was the company I was running. Of course, it's still running after I left the company. So I left that company and then started another company that was a fintech company, thinking about solutions that can be able to allow young people acquire assets. I am a very strong believer on the idea that if you want to build small and medium enterprises, do not just help young people have liquidity, but help them start thinking about acquiring simple assets that then they can be able to not only use to do their businesses, but be able to start forming a base for collateral should they need bigger loans. So one of the assets that I was very interested in is phones. because in the advent of digital taxis, be it Uber, Bolt, at sometimes there was another one called Maramoja, there was one called Little. The biggest asset, apart from the car, which actually most of the drivers did not own those cars. They were given cars by car owners, and then they earn commission. But they needed things like phones to be able to do their businesses. So a phone did not just become an asset for you to be able to make calls, but also to be able to do business. So we started developing APIs for locking those phones, so that businesses that want to lend to this kind of class of people can lend without fear of their phones getting lost, or without even the fear of repossessing those phones. So if you pay, then your phone automatically unlocks. If you don't pay, your phone automatically locks, and that way then you facilitate credit. We also explored other thoughts around expanding that to other assets like laptops for school going students, as well as other movable assets like border industry, where we need innovations around immobilizing, so that there is no high rates of repossession by companies that feel like if border don't pay for their borders, then they need to be repossessed. All you need to do is to immobilize them and then de-risk the capital that the owners who are selling them to border riders can be able to. So I did that a lot, and then I got into politics.
Okay.
So you can imagine, in politics, your boss is not your regular boss in the private sector. Your boss end up being the public and the people who voted for you. All those people are your bosses. So they have got different kind of expectations, different kind of metrics, how they measure your performance. There is one who will think about you as somebody who should be able to solve their basic needs. They have a funeral, they have school fee problems. If you don't solve those, sometimes people see you as not performing. There are some among your bosses who think about you as a legislator, as a legislature who is performing in the house. There are those who also see you from an oversight role, because my role is more oversight of the county resources, apart from just bringing money to the county, also making sure that that we can be able to oversight it. So you've got a divergent aspect of who becomes the person who keeps you at check in terms of your boss. And my boss are the people, so it's very challenging as a job. But I appreciate the privilege to be able to serve the people of Migori, and in extension, the privilege to serve the people of Kenya.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Who is Eddie Gicheru? Let me begin from there.
Wow, that's a tough question. Eddie Gicheru Okech, who am I? I would say that I like saying that I'm an African who likes staying in Kenya. And when I say an African who likes staying in Kenya, is because of the Pan-African element in terms of challenges and opportunities that we have faced. And this is because I was born in a very small village in Migori County. I had a fair share of my struggles growing up, just like any other person. My story is not dissimilar to many people who have faced challenges in Kenya. The only difference for me has been that I've been given opportunities by other people to be who I am. I'm a function of the community, the African community, that has been able to give me a variety of opportunities. And then I studied in Migori, then got a chance to go to Friends School Kamusinga, where I did my high school, but I did not finish my high school there, because in the middle of the violence, I left to go and start Ongoza. And then there was a school that was starting in South Africa called the African Leadership Academy, that then I ended up joining without going back to Kamusinga. So I finished my high school in South Africa, and then went to the US for my undergraduate and postgraduate degree. But I don't think those ones define me. What defined me is that in that journey, I've met a number of African people who have had serious challenges, some of which we are dealing with as a country now, some of which we have dealt with as a country in the past, and some of which other countries are dealing with, that we do share these commonalities of these challenges and problems. The only difference is how we have contextualized how we address them, so that there is this big pool that brings us together as a people called the African continent that gives me a lot of energy. So that's why when asked who is Eddie Gisheru Okech, I'm a simply Kenyan African who has have been privileged to be born and grow up in Kenya.
Okay, yeah. Definitely. Now, Mheshimiwa, I want us to discuss about certain things. Definitely, it's 1 year down the line since Kenya Kwanza ascended to power. Definitely, I wonder how you felt back then, now that your coalition did not make it. But then, that is not the discussion for today. Give me your honest assessment of President William Ruto's performance 1 year down the line.
Wow. If you want to assess anybody's performance, you don't assess them with your own expectations. You assess them with their own promise. There is an issue of promise, and then there is an issue of hope. Hope is what we aspire to, but promise is what they are committing to. So there were a number of things that the Kenya Kwanza government, just like us in the Azimio coalition, we had a number of promises that we made to Kenyans, that we had set ourselves forth that if we were to take on the mantle of leadership of this country, then we will be able to achieve for Kenyans. So I think that the only yardstick I would use to be able to measure how the government of Kenya Kwanza has performed is based on the promises that they had made. And I know this is a hard question, because we are in the technically what some people would perceive as an opposition. Although our constitution did not contemplate having an opposition, we have a majority and minority kind of system in the presidential system. So for the purposes of that conversation, I don't want us to be seen as, because we are outside government and because we are opposition, we are critical. But in my own view, I think that if I look at every single promises that the Kenya Kwanza government ran on, I don't think they're on track. I don't think that they are on track, because the Kenya Kwanza government took over this leadership at a time when Kenyans were having a luminous kind of high cost of living. But that high cost of living has since graduated to be something that is unbearable for Kenyans. And that graduation, I don't think that, and I've had a number of conversations by the Kenya Kwanza regime that, oh, this was the time, this was caused by the Uhuru government. Some people call it the handshake government, which was not there. There was nothing like the handshake government, because I remember very well that when the handshake happened, there is no any single point that the WhyRAILA faction sought for any kind of jobs or positions of responsibilities in the government of Uhuru Kenyatta. In any case, everybody who was aligned with the then Deputy President William Ruto were holding their positions as were drawing their salaries as were, and were holding responsibilities that they were supposed to do for Kenyans. None in the part of the former NASA coalition had any responsibility in government. So to the extent that there could have been a pretext of what I call skyrocketing high cost of living, that still is squarely on the current president. He was the deputy president at that time. So for instance, if you look at the functionality of the devolved systems, he was the chair of IBEC, which is the institution that is mandated constitutionally to actually overlook at resources that are going to the counties and ensuring that counties can be functional and get resources. So the dysfunctionality of this country that came from the period of the previous Jubilee government lies squarely on President Ruto. But the worst thing is that it has skyrocketed under his watch because of bad economic policy. poor economic policy, you know, and the biggest that we have seen even people going to the streets on is over-taxation and sometimes double taxation. And that double taxation has made it impossible for him to stabilize the economy. The second thing is the idea of hustler narratives. There was a lot of promises that were made to hustlers, including making the economy work in terms of putting in hustlers into a business mode that can allow them be in the formal economy. That's also drastically failing. I know there is this agenda around climate change that I think that is laudable in the sense that the government has tried to make climate change very visible to local communities. But in so doing, there has also been eminent challenges in actually being able to figure out how do we actually make a case for the country to participate in a way that we can be able to get benefits from the monies that we are seeing going on carbon credit and stuff. So in a scale of 1 to 10, I would still rate the government at 3.
Well, of course, that is useful. But then you've just mentioned about the promises that the government made during the campaign period. They talked of the Hustler Fund. I've seen it delivered. Why is it that you're not giving them a clap on that? The Hustler Fund is here with us to stay.
The Hustler Fund is the worst form of fund we have as a country. Because the executors of Hustler Funds are executing it on the pretext of Fuliza. It's a copy-paste of Fuliza. And I say this because if you look at what the so-called hustlers and what would make them have commercially viable businesses, you must look at what kind of assets they need to be financed so that they can move forward. So I'll take you, for example, one by one. One of the hustlers that Ruto wanted to empower is the mkokoteni pusher, or maybe you call them wheelbarrow pushers. What is the cost of wheelbarrow in this economy today? We've got a low frame wheelbarrow, we've got a high frame wheelbarrow. A low frame wheelbarrow in Kenya today goes for 4,500. A high frame wheelbarrow goes for 19,500. The hustler fund, who wants to finance a wheelbarrow pusher, gives a wheelbarrow pusher that they must start borrowing at 500 shillings. And then build credit so that they can be able to borrow something like 1,000, 3,000, 10,000. Tell me, when will a wheelbarrow pusher ever been able to qualify for a loan? For instance, in Nairobi, where wheelbarrows are used for high frame wheelbarrow loans of 20,000. It's going to take them 7 years. Okay. Then let's come to the biggest, the swath of what I call real hustlers. The border people in our country, watu wa Wanduthi. NTSA gives us the number of watu Wanduthi in this country to be 1.5 million people who are Wanduthi people. Their basic asset to be able to do their business is the pikipiki.
Yeah, the motorcycle.
How much is the motorcycle going in this economy? The regularly used motorcycle in Nairobi, the most used, the common one, is a TVS. I think it's LHX 150X model, right? That goes right now in the market for 160,000. Tell me which border person can be able to get a credit of 160,000 from the hustler fund. We can go further even to somebody who are kuosha magari. What is the basic asset that they need to be able to do their business if you're really honest about helping them? One, they need at least a 3,000 water tank. A 3,000 water tank in this economy today goes for about 20,000. And then they will need a basic spraying machine to deal with the water issues. They haven't installed it. That goes for about 60,000. Okay, that's already 80,000. The installation and everything comes for about 110,000. Tell me sincerely, which hustler who is a car wash dealer is able to borrow from hustler fund? The structure of hustler fund is completely wrong, and I can assure you there's this argument that mama mbogas are borrowing more. There are people who are borrowing 500 shillings, they're able to buy nyanya, kitungu. Then are you making these people poor or are you making them better? Because if you look at the Fuliza model where there was, that's actually not borrowing, that was an overdraft. That's what Fuliza wanted to do. When you argue that it is helping Mama Mbogas to get 500 shillings, 1,000, then you're arguing a case for an overdraft. It's not a borrowing that allows them to build their assets.
Okay.
And the way overdraft works is that overdraft best works as a consumption financing mechanism. Because what you'll say is Mtu wa Mjengo will go and borrow 100 shillings from Fuliza, the same way they will borrow 100 shillings from Asla Fund, so that they go and buy chapati mandondo, knowing very well that if they work until evening, then they'll be paid 700 shillings, they'll pay the 100 bob. And by the way, if you go and study statistics of Fuliza, which I also believe is a statistic that the president keeps on quoting, about 7 billion of people have borrowed, 7 billion shillings of the amount that has been borrowed on Fuliza, you will find that about 68% of borrowers are borrowing between Kenya shillings 1 shillings and 100 bob. You will find that another 20% of borrowers are borrowing between Kenya shillings 100 and 500. Only about 1% is borrowing between Kenya shillings 2,500 and 70,000, which forms the bulk of assets that can be able to do business. The problem with that is that you are building a loaning mechanism that people are loaning, are trying to get loans from to be able to consume.
Okay.
So you end up making these so-called hustlers poor. They can't grow businesses. They can't be able to mainstream in the economy. So for me, on that basis alone, Hustler Fund is a big con game. And in any case, David Ndi, who is an economic advisor to the president, in fact the chair of that panel, said,
the Presidential Economic Council, that
yes,
is.
yeah, of that council, right, said that the ministry is not controlling that fund. Okay? And then we also saw the minister for cooperative saying that this fund is being controlled by them. So there is a convoluted idea of how this Hustler Fund is running. And I think that is the easiest way to actually empower larger businesses, because you don't have a borrowing bracket, so that you will get that maybe larger businesses are borrowing up to 100 million, and then the hustlers are still constricted on what they can be able to borrow, and then you end up not building them. So it is a fail to that aspect.
Okay.
But to the extent that people are borrowing from it and are paying back, if you are measuring the success of Hustler Fund by paying back rate, then you must as well argue the case for Fuliza, because it's a consumption mechanism, it's an overdraft. Of course, people will pay back, okay? So they can be able to keep on consuming. But as for purposeful element of it, of making sure that you're building businesses, it is not doing that.
Well, I get you. But then, to be fair with the government side would say that during this kind of period, since they took the mantle of leading this country, you've not given them that conducive environment to bring the cost of living down. You've not given them that kind of environment upon which they can work and deliver to the country. They're saying that your coalition has rocked the streets with demonstrations everywhere, and that has actually made them stagger a little bit. What do you say of that?
We have a constitution as a country. And there is this notion that democracy equals to peaceful elections. That is something that I would want to invite the president to actually move away from. And any other people who might have that notion that where there's a peaceful election,
and there is democracy.
There's democracy. Okay? Democracy is a system of checks and balances. Okay? So that if you do a process, you know, that if you participate in any process, that process is in itself intrinsic. It is good in itself, in the sense that you must go and check whether it was done in the right manner and whether it's progressing in the right manner. If we have come out of elections that we are not willing, we are not even willing to have a commission around auditing those elections, then those elections are not democratic. That's why we have got a virtue of independent parliament, that if you have given you money as an executive and a budget to go with, to go and do XYZ. The Parliament of Kenya can call you in different committees and ask you, how did you use it? Can you run an audit on the money you used? That's a democratic government. In more autocratic governments, people can use money. They don't need to account to anyone. They can say that I use it on this as an executive, I use it on that, but nobody needs to confirm, nobody needs to verify. So the first thing is that we must not come out of an election that we cannot be able to edit. The second thing is that all the issues that Azimio has been raising in the post-election times are constitutional issues and serious constitutional issues. So when something comes that defies the constitution or undermines the constitution, nothing else becomes supreme. You can't say that running a government is more supreme to constitutional issues. So for instance, the issue of high cost of living. If you have got a convoluted idea of where this country should go in terms of wealth creation, in terms of job creation, that is still hurting Kenyans. For instance, this issue around I'm going to tax you to be able to build houses for other people. I mean, you can't. Constitutionally, you can't take my money and force me to save in some scheme that I'm not going to benefit from, and two, I'm not willing to be part of. It's in the constitution. The issues around economic issue that we're talking about, Article 43 of the constitution requires that any government of the day must ensure that you and I and any other Kenyan cannot go hungry, cannot go without housing, cannot go without health care. So these issues are substantive. Another issue that even last week we saw a number of ODM MPs being expelled from the party ODM. Chapter 2 of the constitution was the first chapter to define what Kenya is. When you ask, what is Kenya? It says Kenya is a democratic republic that is found on the tenets of multipartism. Okay? And the attempt of that clause was to make sure that the executive and parliament are separate. You know why this was? Because there used to be a time where in this country when parliament and the executive used to be one, such that if you are parliamentarian or elected by the people, for you to get any form of development in your region, you had to go and kneel to the president, and then he'll tell you this place will get development and that place won't get development because I am the president. The budget used to be made by technocrats in the treasury, and then they will bring it just for ratification in parliament. But now this new constitution has made parliament independent to the extent that budget emanates from parliament. Budget gets interrogated in parliament, and more so, budget can be absolutely stopped and rectified within parliament. That means that allocation of resources therefore happens within parliament, not in state house. But then here is a case whereby you see a president and an executive that keeps on buying MPs and then luring them with the concept of I'm going to give you development, I'm going to give you a different kind of goodies for your region. What does that do? One, it defies that article of the constitution, and number two, it definitely makes sure that you entrench a despotic nature in terms of governance, basically a dictatorship. And these are things that you can't just say that because you have gone to an election, let the president just do whatever he wants, even if it's defying the constitution.
I'm coming.
Those should not work. Yes.
I'm coming to this issue of the expelled members of parliament belonging to the ODM party. But then let's finish with this part that we were talking about here. Do you believe that your demonstrations have not in any way affected the delivery of the president, and therefore he should not use that as a scapegoat?
It shouldn't. It shouldn't, because unless the executive does not understand what demonstrations are, and Article 37 of the Constitution, Article 37 of the Constitution recognizes the fact that you are a president because you have been donated for power. That is under Article 1 of the Constitution. It says that even me as a senator or any other person who is elected, that sovereignty belongs to the people of Kenya, and when they elect you, they are donating to you their power, in the trust that you will do, one, what they want you to do as a people, and number two, what does not hurt them. If you go there and start hurting them, the Constitution gives them the power to take that power away. That's why the Constitution says they can exercise that power directly or indirectly. Now, that direct action or inaction of the people of Kenya is entrenched under Article 37 that says they will exercise it by being able to petition through demonstration, protests to different government institutions. If you allowed Kenyans to exercise their power, okay, petition, go back home, petition, go back home, okay, there won't be the kind of chaos you have seen. But here is a case whereby when a Kenyan comes, your boss has come to petition you, then instead of listening to what they want you to do or what their grievances are, you meet them with violence. You meet them with serious state-sponsored violence. What happens? They will respond back. I have been in a number of demonstrations in this country from the beginning of this year, and I can assure you that I have seen cases where people demonstrate peacefully and go back home. There was a day we went to a place called Imaradaima, and then we went to a place called Kware. We had demonstrated for 3 good hours. Without any chaos, without any fracas, people were just expressing themselves and chanting. When we got to Kware, we were met with the kind of violence that nobody has ever seen. So, if the argument is that the economy stagnated on the basis of demonstrations that end up turning violent, then it is state-sponsored violence and must never happen. And the government must not meet its people with the kind of violence that we have seen in this country when they have come to simply demonstrate, protest, and petition.
Okay, Mheshimiwa, now that you are an official of the Orange Democratic Movement Party, definitely one of the parties affiliated to the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition, something is taking place in this house, and last week we witnessed an expulsion take place involving a number of MPs who are actually alleged to be being courteous with the president of the day. A number of them also find there in a decision that has not gone well with quite a number of them. One, I would like to know, what is it that is happening in the Orange Party? Because these members of parliament are saying that they have the right to associate with people. Where do you people draw the line between open-mindedness and people making their own decisions vis-a-vis sticking to the party's directives?
Unless those MPs don't stay in Kenya or they don't live in Kenya, the line has to be drawn, even if you go to court, by the way. It's only that sometimes our courts are also sometimes compromised by different powers that be. It's upon them, you know, it's upon the players in the judiciary to figure out whether they want to be a people who can be able to build a stronger nation, because at the end of the day, this nation is a nation that we are borrowing it from the future generation. We are here for a certain period of time. We are all passing, but the biggest blessing we can do as a people is to build a country whereby our children or our children's children will be happy to belong in. So if you choose to kill your country because of different dealings here and there, that's your problem. But even judicially will agree with you that there are 2 personalities of the president. There is one personality of him as a head of state. Then the second personality of him as a leader of UDA. As a leader of UDA. At what point does a parliamentarian say, I'm associating with the president as a president, and I'm associating with the president as a leader of UDA?
But this is his president as well.
No, it doesn't matter, because you are, you know, an elected member of parliament is not just a regular person. It's somebody who has been given power, sovereign power by the people. That's why in our borders we call them honorable members or mheshimiwa. Respected above other people in the sense that we have signed a contract. Okay? There's a social contract that you have signed with a member of parliament. So that when they say that they've got the freedom of association in the context of politics, because the argument has been that we have gone to State House to look for development. And I've told you that when you are electing your member of parliament, you told them, go to parliament to get me development from parliament.
Not the State House.
Not the State House. That is what you consider elected them to go and do. So when somebody argues that I am going to State House to get you development, is that the agreement you agreed, you signed with the member of parliament as a voter? I would want to know that. If that is the agreement, which I doubt, then it's a very unfortunate argument, because then we don't need parliament. We just don't need parliament. We will just, because if you keep on going to the State House and saying that my development will come from State House, first you're going to have favoritism. Is the people who can do the dirty job for the president who will get more development. Some regions will not have equal. That's why we debate in parliament, so that there is equality and equity in terms of those resources. We can interrogate what the president is proposing. But if you go there and say you're getting development, and that development that he has as a president, you're saying that he's a president, he's head of state, is a manuscript, okay, of his political party. It came with a manifesto that was not your manifesto. Is implementing that manifesto. Are you not confused?
Okay.
That is why, if you read, I told you about chapter 2 of our constitution that talks about Kenya being a multi-party state. Some of these articles of the constitution are followed by parliamentary actions in terms of legislation. There is an act of parliament that was passed called the Political Parties Act. The Political Parties Act, section 14 _E, says clearly that if you have been elected by any party and you seem to advance not even just the agenda, it says the interest
of a different party,
of a different political party, you shall have been deemed to have left your position. It doesn't recommend that there will be another action that will be taken against you. If you are honorable enough, the moment you have taken that position that I'm going to support this other agenda of this other political party, you should, if you are honest, if you are honorable, you should deem that you have left your position. You should not even wait for a disciplinary committee in a political party that you belong to. You should just leave honorably and then go and vie and advance the interest of that other political party. Once you have been elected by a political party, you are married for 5 years.
Okay.
With that political party. It's a marriage, it's a 5-year marriage, and there's no compromise about it. Because if the moment you start compromising and start quoting that, no, I have a right of association, but it's just the president of the country, people also associate with the president of the country where you need to associate with the president of the country.
Okay. So, Mheshimiwa, what does actually this expulsion now mean to the members who've been expelled? We've seen the likes of the Langata Member of Parliament, Felix Oduor there, Kisumu Senator, the likes of Suba Member of Parliament therein. What does it mean for them? Because we've seen a number of people being expelled from parties in the past, yet they've gone ahead to serve their full term. The other week I read from the dailies of reporting of expulsion to nowhere. Does it mean that this time round the ODM leadership is perhaps determined to make sure that these members of parliament lose their seat? Or what does it mean for them?
I don't think, first of all, that ODM is malicious. It's not the issue of expulsion of those members of parliament from the party is not a malicious move. It's a constitutional move. ODM has been here for the last 18 years. In fact, of all the parties that are operating within Kenya today, that are in significant position in parliament, what are called parliamentary parties, ODM is the oldest. UDA came here the other day. Okay, Jubilee came here in 2013. UDM, which is also another party run by Captain Ali Roba, senator for Mandera, is a recent party. So ODM is the oldest party. And I want to add that it is the oldest democratic party that has tried to entrench its systems on the grassroots to ensure that what is democratic in this country must always be entrenched.
And we also have Kanu around when you talk about age.
I mean, is Kanu parliamentary right now?
Anyway, let's
I'm talking about parliamentary parties that are significant right now. And I think that maybe WhyRAILA is a serious parliamentary party. Okay? But that said, so I want to clear this thing that, number one, ODM is not being personal with these members. ODM is not being malicious to these members. These members ODM is just trying to stick to the constitution of Kenya and institutionalize it in the DNA of Kenyan politics. But then another important thing that I must say is that doing the right thing, even if you are alone and failing at doing that right thing, is not a bad thing. Okay? If you have got a system where some powerful individual in this country can be able to manipulate court processes and manipulate the judiciary, that things that are obvious, such as this issue, cannot see the light of day, and they keep on manipulating the system, that members will go to the judiciary, drag issues in court. You know, if our courts were actually sanctified, they should be able to rush this kind of cases. But if there are individuals in the judiciary or in the executive who feel that they can actually be able to manipulate court processes, and they will never have this kind of clauses come to light, that is up to them. But people who are doing the right thing must continue doing the right thing, even if they are failing at it, until such a day that it will come to pass that this thing. Let me tell you, this country was not given independence. This country obtained independence. And why did the country obtain independence? Is because a few committed set of individuals who are selfless kept on doing the right thing and fighting against colonialism, against shackles of manipulation by the political class that was foreign, and eventually they did succeed. Okay. So even on this matter of political parties and sanity in our political system, whereby members can just go get elected and then manipulate voters, they get elected, and then they turn their back to their voters, and then they start dealing in government and doing entrepreneurial things in government, thinking that now they are supreme and they have got godfathers and the institutions of executive and institutions of judiciary to protect them because they have got networks in that. They can continue doing them today, tomorrow, all life through. But I can assure you, one day it will come to an end. Okay? With regards to the fate of these individuals, I don't think, if you had asked me about this yesterday, I would have commented. But I've just seen that today there is a circular from High Court, that a number of them had filed for an hold on this by ODM, and they were granted that, pending the hearing. The same thing that I'm talking about, the duality of justice, okay, of our justice system. So I think that I won't recommend because it is sub judice, but I think it is critical that Kenyans start understanding that there are some ideals of governance. Remember our constitution, our constitution is the most recent constitution after the colonial constitution. Okay? So there are some ideals that we as Kenyans must choose to die for, even if it means that we are dying for them. However long it will take us to make sure that those ideals are lived by, we must fight for them. And this is one of those that I really support, Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga. I really support the Azimio leadership, and I also support the party of the ODM specifically in terms of ensuring that there is ultimate party discipline. And this is something that I wish that was bipartisan to both Kenya Kwanza and the Azimio side of the coalitions, because it is something that is eminently important to how we structure our politics and how we start honest and ethical politics, which is hygienic in our country.
Well, we are waiting to see whether the Orange Democratic Party will be successful in expelling these members of parliament. So that is to say, but then you've said that the party's position right now is that the members stay expelled. Is that the party's position?
That's the party position, yes. And remember, the party has got a constitution that is entrenched in the Political Parties Act, as entrenched in the Constitution of Kenya, and is consistent. So the party has made its position very, very clear. Let the members, they are free to also explore other, we are a free democracy. You can be able to explore other means of justice. But in my humble opinion, no personal malice whatsoever I strongly believe that politicians in Kenya need to start thinking about hygiene in our politics, and that function of hygiene is being true to the people who elected you and making sure that you can stick with them in the mandate that they gave you.
Should the constituents of those particular, the affected members of parliament, perhaps start preparing their voting cards and get back to the ballot?
Ideally, yes. If the, you know, the first action should be done, but of course with this court order of course that does affect that institution, but that institution called the political the register of political parties should actually take action on this party. I know they have a 7 days window. If that 7 day window passes without any legal actions that have been taken by these individuals, then they should take the action. And I also hope that the courts will give not just the individuals justice, but also look at the other side, giving the people justice. Should they give that justice, then the answer is as obvious as you know.
There we have, but of course we've had one of the senators getting affected, the senator for Kisumu, of course Professor Tom Ojienda. I'm trying to relate the kind of development that would warrant a senator to go to the state anyway, state house that is, but as you've said here, that is not the motive. But then finally, Mheshimiwa, as we wind up this show, you're a senator in this country. What is it that you people want with the so-called Senate Oversight Fund? What fund do you need actually to exercise your mandate upon which you are elected for? Because we've had this even with the CDF. The court actually explained itself on that, and it was declared unconstitutional. We've seen that come through, and right now we've seen it being on one of the agendas therein, in that kind of the talks that are ongoing, the CDF therein, and then we are also witnessing now the Senate Oversight Fund. Do you people really need this fund to exercise your mandate?
You know, the role of a senator and the role of a member of parliament are defined. Article 94, 95, 96 are dedicated to defining the roles of a senator and the role of a member of National Assembly. So as a parliament, our roles include legislation, oversight, legislation, and oversight, and then representation. And representation, that is. For which, in my view, we are paid to do. But then, with that regard, we don't need an oversight fund. And I want to make it clear. The sister fund for the other side is the CDF, the Constituency Development Fund. Constituency Development Fund is illegal. It's unconstitutional. You can't be the person who's supposed to oversight the people who are implementing policy and are implementing any functions of government, and then you also expect to be given money to implement the same things. Who will oversight the MP? In fact, oversight fund and the CDF are different. Oversight fund is to help you do the role of oversight if there was need for it, but I don't think there's need for that. I want to differentiate the idea of oversight fund and oversight facilitation. Those are two different things. We don't need a fund to oversight, but senators do need oversight facilitation. What do I mean by this? The Parliament of Kenya facilitates what we call members of Parliament, because senators and members of National Assembly are all members of Parliament. Facilitates you to go to your constituency to be able to perform the functions, the three functions that I told you, because you do them both in the Parliament and you do them at home. Now, the problem that senators are facing is that we don't have any allocation whatsoever that can facilitate you to go home. Like for instance, women reps have got something called NGAF, which is money with infrastructure and vehicles and resources that facilitates them to go to different parts of the constituency to be able to do what they need. The members of National Assembly have got CDF that facilitates them to go to the grassroots. And then we are given equal amount of money, and this is public knowledge. We are given about 811,000 every month to facilitate our staffs in the grassroots. Now, MPs, the members of National Assembly have got one single constituency. That when they live here, they go and they're given that 811,000 to be able to facilitate them within that constituency. Senators are also given the same amount, and even in that parliament, it is called constituency facilitation finances that allows them to go to the constituency. But the senators are only in one, the MPs are only in one constituencies. Somebody like me, I am in 8 constituencies. Because when I go to Migori, you will find that sometimes it becomes difficult for me to go to all those constituencies to look at the projects that are going on, to confirm a few things here and there that are going on. So there need to be facilitation for senators to be able to cover all their constituencies when they go home. You can't give the same facilitation you're giving to one single member constituency the same as what you're giving a senator. That is the oversight facilitation that we're talking about. It is not an oversight fund. It is an equivalent of what a constituency gets to facilitate the member and his staff to be able to do their function in the constituency. But the problem is that our constituency is a county, it's not a single sub-county. That's the only problem. So, for instance, if you're giving a member of, let's say, Uriri constituency 811, and I've got 8, you should give me times 8, because I'm going to 8 constituencies. Sifuna should be given times
the number of constituencies
that he has. The member of what a center called Metu, who comes from Nyandarua, he has got 4 constituencies that he has to go through. And some of them, by the way, are very vast counties that form these constituencies. It just makes that sense, because if you don't do that, you are forcing me that the salary that I get in parliament, other than giving it to Mwananchi to support sometimes some of these personal problems that they have, I also have to use it extra. I also have to use the extra of my salary to be able to put fuel and go to every place in my county, and that's just not fair to senators. It's not tenable. So it's not Senate Oversight Fund. It is Senate Oversight Facilitation, because members of National Assembly have the same engorged within CDF. Women reps also have the same engorged within GAF that they already have. Senators are straining. They're not able to do their work properly, and yet they're given the full mandate of actually oversighting a lot of money in the counties.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is it from the Migori Senator Honorable Eddie Okech. We've been having him here on this interesting episode of the Candid Talk. Definitely love to welcome him back here once again, so that we redefine the role of a senator in this country, because of what you've heard him talk about. Definitely he's talked of not actually oversight fund, but oversight facilitation, that senators need to be facilitated to move around in doing their duties in this country. Kindly weigh in on this conversation and tell us what you think about the conversation that we've just had here with the senator. Senator, thank you so much for making time.
Thank you.
For us here at Herman Manyora, and of course we are so much glad. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a production of the Nairobi Review. Please stay tuned to some of our programs that will be coming up next. Very big thank you to all those members who made this production a success. Of course, Richard Mwenja today was not hosting, he was here with the technical crew headed by Rakim and Bush on the other side, and of course our youngest member here, Hope. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Evan Sokinyi. Till we have another episode of the Candid Talk again. Thank you for watching.